I had dedicated an entire year to 12-hour shifts in 90-degree temperatures abroad, fantasizing about the tranquility of my Arizona ridge. Upon my eventual return, that tranquility had vanished. It lay concealed beneath 3 imposing residences and an HOA placard hammered into my soil. Their assumption had been that I'd disappeared. They had forgotten whose property they were appropriating. Working in a region like Northern teaches you certain truths. The relentless heat reduces you to your fundamental essence. It shows no concern for your vehicle, your income, or the name emblazoned on your credentials. It simply persists day after day, like a mallet forged from sunlight. 12 hours daily, occasionally 14. And once you've withstood that, fear of trivial matters evaporates. Documentation, hierarchy, disturbances, the craving for tranquility begins to dominate. For me, that tranquility had an identity. 6 acres of elevated desert beyond Cotton Hollow, Arizona. My property, my elevation. That location possessed a variety of stillness that resonated like an ancient melody you perceived through sensation rather than sound. I had constructed my veranda to overlook the canyon. Consequently, each evening the illumination descended perfectly, amber through the mesquite, gentle against the ridgeline. When I executed that deed 15 years prior, I established a commitment to myself. No HOA, no adjacent residents encroaching on my existence, no authority dictating my lifestyle, merely sky, earth, and the whisper of wind currents. By the conclusion of my overseas assignment, I had been tallying the days like an inmate anticipating release. When the aircraft descended in Phoenix, I secured a weathered Chevy Silverado with one headlight dimmer than its companion and traveled north, windows lowered, atmosphere arid as chalk. The desert sun contacted my forearm through the glass, and for the initial time in months, I didn't resist the heat. That represents my variety of heat, the kind that doesn't dominate you. The journey consumed 3 hours, identical to always. Highway, then asphalt, then gravel. Beyond that, exclusively dirt. The variety of dirt that adheres to your footwear and remains there. Each revolution felt like instinctive memory. I recognized each curve, each mesquite tree inclining into the wind, each deteriorated fence post that still maintained its position like a sentinel from another era. I possessed no justification to anticipate anything unusual. Prior to my departure, I had completed everything according to protocol, submitted travel notifications with the county, employed a monitoring service, disconnected the power, secured the well, even affixed a laminated notice inside the window. Temporary absence, not abandonment. I had observed too many individuals forfeit what they constructed because they trusted systems to safeguard them. I refused to become one of them. Consequently, when I navigated the final curve and observed the ridge ascending ahead, my chest constricted the way it perpetually did, half pride, half relief. The hill appeared identical, bleached amber beneath the sun. For an instant, I could almost perceive the creak of my porch swing, the murmur of dust in the wind. Then I witnessed it, a glimpse of lumber, a form that didn't belong. Initially, I concluded it was an illusion, the variety you experience after driving excessively long in heat distortion. But it wasn't. A fence. A new one. Elevated, fresh-cut cedar running where my old split-rail fence had been, and beyond it, rooftops, 3 of them. Fresh stucco, pastel coating, tile roofs gleaming like they had been transported from Scottsdale. I eased the truck to a halt. The engine idled slow and steady while my consciousness attempted to comprehend the sight. There, beyond that fence, stood my house. Small, square, built with my own hands, except now it appeared like a specter, a forgotten relic surrounded by strangers. I exited the truck. The wind struck me, carrying the faint hum of air conditioning units and the soft clink of wine glasses. There were people sitting on porches on my land, sipping beverages, talking, laughing as if they had always resided there, as if they belonged. Then my eyes captured the sign bolted to the new gate. Stone Ridge Circle. HOA, private access, members only. For a moment I didn't breathe. Then I did the only thing I could. I started walking toward it. Boots sinking into the dust I'd known all my life, a low burn rising in my chest. I wasn't confused anymore. Not really. Shock had a short half-life in me. This wasn't confusion, this was insult. Whatever waited past that gate, whoever thought they could build walls on my soil, they just declared war, and they didn't even know it yet. I don't remember turning off the engine. One second I was sitting there gripping the wheel, the next I was standing beside the truck, the heat crawling up through my boots. The sound of my tires crunching the gravel faded behind me, replaced by something I hadn't heard on this land in 15 years. Voices, laughter, the kind that didn't belong here. A pair of lawn chairs sat on a brand-new porch 20 yards inside the fence. Two people, mid-40s, wine glasses in hand, looked up when they saw me. The man raised his brows like I was the stranger. The woman gave a polite little wave. That suburban kind of wave that says you're trespassing, but I'll pretend to be nice about it. The sign at the gate was real enough. Stone Ridge Circle. OA. Members only. I ran my fingers along the metal, still warm from the welder's torch. The bolts were new. The padlock gleamed. Then she appeared. Out of one of the pastel houses came a woman in a beige linen suit, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. Her walk was brisk, measured, heels clicking against the newly paved walkway like a metronome, hair curled just right, the color of bottled confidence, sunglasses that probably cost more than my truck, and that smile, thin, professional, cold enough to keep milk fresh. She stopped a few feet from the gate and tilted her head, assessing me like I was a misplaced delivery. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her tone was perfectly calm, perfectly condescending. "Yeah," I said. "You can tell me why there are 3 houses on my land." Her lips didn't even twitch. "I'm sorry." "Your land?" I nodded toward the ridge. "That's my house up there. Been mine for 15 years. Bought and paid for. You can check the county records if you want." She adjusted her sunglasses as if blocking out my existence. "Oh, you must be looking for the HOA office. It's in the south unit just past the stone walkway." "No," I said steadily. "I'm not looking for an office. I'm looking for an explanation." Something flickered in her eyes, not surprise, annoyance, like a teacher dealing with a slow student. "Well," she said, voice sugar-coated. "Mr. Martin, Riley Martin." She tapped her clipboard, flipped a laminated page. "Well, Mr. Martin, this property was classified as transitional use after more than 12 months of non-occupancy. No utilities, no mail service, no response to notices. Under county code, it was listed as available for provisional allotment." I stared at her. Words flat in my mouth. "That's impossible. I never surrendered it. I filed documentation before I left the country." Her tone didn't change. "I'm afraid the process moved forward in your absence. The Stone Ridge Circle Homeowners Association applied for emergency housing authorization under the Transitional Availability Statute. Everything was approved, all by the book." "By whose book?" I asked. "By the county's," she said, smiling again, tighter this time. "You're free to review the paperwork through our online portal, but I should warn you, our board's invested heavily. Any reversal could have significant legal consequences." That word, consequences, hit like a spark on dry kindling. She thought she was warning me. She didn't realize she was lighting the fuse. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You built over my fence line, hooked into my utilities, and locked my gate, and you think I'm the problem?" She clasped her hands neatly over the clipboard. "Mr. Martin, I understand this is upsetting, but you have to see it from the community's perspective. The land was vacant. We've improved it. We've added value." "Value," I repeated. "To who?" Her smile sharpened. "To everyone who matters." For a long moment neither of us spoke. The desert wind moved between us, dry and silent. A hawk circled above the ridge, my ridge, casting its shadow across the fence line. Then she extended her hand. Perfect nails, perfect arrogance. "Karen Holdridge," she said, "president of the Stone Ridge Circle HOA. Welcome to the neighborhood, neighbor." I didn't take her hand. Instead, I turned back toward my truck, each step slow, deliberate. My boots crunched the dirt of my own driveway, now polished stone, like a reminder of what had been stolen. When I reached the door, I looked once more at the sign on the gate. "Private access, members only." Under my breath, I said it out loud. "Not anymore." Then I got in, started the engine, and drove the perimeter road that used to be my fence line. The land was still mine under the skin of all their fresh paint and asphalt. I could feel it. Every dip, every slope. They might have paved over the surface, but underneath, it still breathed me. And I knew before I hit the main road, before the dust even settled behind me, this wasn't confusion, this wasn't misunderstanding, this was a takeover, and I'd just declared war right back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table of a cheap roadside motel, a cup of gas station coffee cooling beside a pile of papers that used to mean peace of mind. Deed, purchase record, notarized service agreements. Every document was clean, airtight, legitimate. The county seal, the title number, the plat map, mine. No loopholes, no gray areas. And yet, someone had taken my silence and turned it into an opening. By sunrise, I was parked in front of the county records office. The building looked the same as it had a decade ago. Sun-faded brick, an American flag hanging half-tangled in the morning breeze. Inside, the air smelled like old toner and slow air conditioning. Ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, moving more dust than air. A long counter divided the lobby, guarded by a young man in a faded county polo, slouched behind a computer with a Vote Local sticker on it. I set my file down. Morning, I need to pull property files under the name Riley Martin. Parcel 86,014, registered in 2009. He typed something, clicked, frowned. Yeah, we've got a file. Two, actually. Two? I asked. How can there be two? He turned the monitor toward me. One's your original ownership record. The other's a transitional claim filed about 9 months ago. That word again. Transitional. My stomach went cold. Filed by who? He scrolled. SQ. Hinting at the screen. Looks like Stone Ridge Circle Homeowners Association. Signed by a, Karen Holdridge. I leaned in closer. On the screen was a scanned form. Statement of intent to vacate and forfeit. Date stamped 11 months ago. Under signature of owner, my name, Riley Martin, scribbled in a handwriting that wasn't mine. My jaw locked so hard it ached. That's not my signature. The clerk shrugged, palms up. It went through. There's also a digital affidavit referencing discontinuation of property upkeep and mail suspension as supporting evidence. That's how they justified the transfer to provisional use. Transfer, I repeated slowly, not ownership. He nodded. Technically, no. But once they start construction, provisional rights escalate under development law. He said it like reading a weather report, like it was nothing. I stared at the screen, and then I saw it. The second signature. Cosigner. Gerald Martin. My father's name. The man who died 7 years ago. My throat closed. Who signed that? The clerk looked confused. Says here, notarized by Leonard Pierce. I forced the words out. He's been retired for 5 years. The clerk blinked. Well, that's odd. Yeah, I said quietly. Odd. He looked uneasy now, maybe sensing something beyond paperwork. Look, I just pull records, he said. But that's pretty messed up. Print me copies of everything, I said. Every page tied to that transfer. Include timestamps, signature data, metadata if you've got it. Sure thing, he said, clicking through menus. The printer behind him started to whine and spit out sheets of thin paper, one after another. Each page sounded like a nail being driven into something I used to trust. When he handed me the stack, it was heavier than it should have been. Fraud has a weight to it. You can feel it in your hands. I walked out into the sunlight, the papers tucked under my arm, and for a moment just stood there on the courthouse steps. The heat hit me full in the face, but it didn't burn. It steadied me. My hand shook once, just once, and then stopped. Not fear, not weakness, just the body recognizing what the mind already knew. This was war by paperwork, and I'd spent a lifetime learning how to fight in worse places. I looked down at my name forged in black ink, at my father's ghost dragged into the mess, and right then, something in me settled. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to document everything. By the time I reached the truck, I already had the next stop in mind, the county planning office. Because if this went through, someone had signed off on it. Someone had looked at those forgeries and said, approved. And I wanted to see their face when I asked them why. The planning and zoning department sat 2 blocks down from the records office, tucked behind a sun-bleached row of palm trees and a flag that had seen too many summers. I'd been in that building once before, years back when I first applied for a utility trench permit. Back then, it smelled like paper and floor wax and small-town competence. That smell was gone now. Inside, the air felt still. A receptionist looked up from her desk, her nameplate reading Mara. She smiled the way people do when they already plan to say no. Morning, I said, setting my folder down. I need to review zoning permits issued for parcel 86,014, filed under my name or any provisional claimant. Her hands paused above the keyboard. Parcel number again? I repeated it. She typed. Her screen flickered blue, then green. Then her eyebrows lifted just slightly. Oh, she said. That parcel was part of a provisional authorization last year. Temporary administrative housing. Correct. That's what they're calling it, I said. I want to see the file. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. You'll want to talk to Supervisor Sharp. He approved that one. Perfect, I said. Is he in? She looked uncomfortable. He's currently on leave. How long's he been out? About 3 weeks. I waited. Any chance of speaking to whoever signed off for him? Her fingers fluttered nervously. We can't discuss personnel status, sir. I leaned in slightly. Not aggressive, just steady. I'm not asking about personnel. I'm asking how 3 homes got built on private land without a single public notice. That's a legal question, not a personnel one. Her eyes darted to the hallway behind her, then back. Would you like me to request the file digitally? I'd prefer it printed, I said. All of it. She sighed, clicked through menus, and the printer started humming. The sound filled the lobby, page after page sliding into the tray. When she handed me the stack, I could already see what I'd come for. Sharp's name, his signature, and a stamp that didn't belong. Every permit, every authorization, every emergency housing exemption carried his approval. But the dates didn't make sense. The first permit was stamped February 14th. The construction photos I'd seen on drone footage later would show bulldozers breaking ground 3 months before that, meaning the permits were backdated to cover what was already built. Mara, I said quietly, do you usually issue construction approval before public notice? Her mouth opened, then closed. All proper steps were followed, she recited. Sure they were, I said, gathering the pages. In someone's version of proper... I stepped outside into the afternoon glare, the folder heavy in my hands. The sun hit hard, but my thoughts were colder than the tile floors inside. If the permits were fake, Sharp's leave wasn't a vacation. It was damage control. Someone higher up had realized the paper trail wouldn't hold. I drove straight to the property line, needed to see it with my own eyes again. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. New asphalt roads had been poured where dirt paths used to be. The electrical poles I'd installed myself years ago, painted over, numbered, folded into a grid that wasn't mine. Even the soil looked changed, graded, flattened, engineered for someone else's vision. They hadn't just built houses, they'd rewritten geography. At the edge of the new development, I stopped at what used to be my mailbox. It was gone, replaced by a sleek metal unit with HOA branding. I stared at it, jaw tightening. A delivery van pulled up beside me, the driver rolling down his window. You waiting for mail? He asked. Not anymore, I said. He laughed like it was a joke. Well, this box goes to Stone Ridge Management Office now, downtown Phoenix, forwarded mail and all. I watched him drive off, dust trailing behind. That meant every letter, every legal notice, every certified warning had gone straight to them first. They hadn't just stolen my land. They'd intercepted my voice. I sat there for a long minute, the sun crawling higher, the pages of Sharp's approvals fluttering in the passenger seat. A forgery could be fixed, but this was infiltration. They had connections, they had signatures, they had infrastructure, and they'd used all of it to make me disappear on paper. The thought settled deep like a nail driven into oak. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan, and whoever built it was smart enough to think I'd never come back. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of Arizona morning that promises heat but gives you a short mercy first. I sat outside the motel room, coffee steaming in a paper cup, folder of documents on the metal table beside me. The world was still half asleep. A truck passed on the highway, its echo fading into the hills. I'd spent the night sorting through everything. Every forged line, every fake signature, every permit that shouldn't exist. The pile on the table wasn't just paper. It was a confession written in someone else's handwriting. I looked at the mess and said out loud to no one in particular, I fought worse battles, just never on paper. That was when I decided to stop reacting and start building my own offense. The first call I made was to Dana Pritchard. I'd worked with her years ago on a contract dispute between a contractor and the Army Corps of Engineers. She wasn't cheap, but she was the kind of lawyer who made bureaucrats flinch when they saw her name on a letterhead. When she picked up, her voice was calm, clipped, like she'd been awake since before sunrise. Riley Martin, she said. Haven't heard that name in a while. What's the problem? HOA built 3 houses on my land, I said. Forged signatures, fake permits, county involvement. I've got paperwork. There was a pause, then flatly, where are you? Cotton Hollow, 6-acre parcel outside the city line. I'm 2 hours away, she said. Email me scans of everything you've got. Don't talk to the county again. Don't talk to anyone. I'll meet you before lunch. When she arrived, the temperature had already hit 90. She stepped out of her car in black slacks, sunglasses, and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled once. Professional, but ready to work. She looked through the field papers quietly, page by page, her expression hardening. Finally, she said, I've seen greedy HOAs. I've seen sloppy zoning. But forging a dead man's signature? She looked up at me. They're finished. That was the moment I knew I wasn't alone. Dana didn't waste time. Within the hour, she had her laptop open, pulling property statutes, county codes, and precedent cases. She made a list of what we'd need. Forensic signature analysis, digital trace of the MITs, server logs from the planning office. Then she asked, You still have that cyber guy you worked with overseas? The one who tracked the contractor leaks? I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Leo Barden, Flagstaff now, runs a private investigations outfit. Call him, she said. He'll be our eyes in the wires. When Leo picked up, I could hear typing in the background. He didn't even hesitate. Send me everything, he said. Full copies, raw metadata, screenshots. I'll dig where they think no one's looking. That was Leo. Sharp, fast, zero drama, the kind of man who trusted code more than conversation. By that afternoon, Dana had already filed a preliminary injunction, an official notice to freeze all activity on the parcel pending investigation. It wouldn't stop them forever, but it would slow them down. We both knew time was our enemy. The longer those houses stood, the more legitimate they'd look. Before sunset, I made one more call, this time to someone who didn't work with code or statutes. Angela Dominguez, retired NYPD, private investigator, 2 medals and a reputation for making people nervous just by walking into a room. She'd helped me once track down stolen equipment on a project site. Angela, I said when she answered, You ever heard of a homeowners association stealing property? She laughed, a low, gravelly sound. Honey, I've heard of them stealing peace of mind, but land? That's new. Then you'll like this case, I said. They faked a forfeiture notice and built over my home. Say no more. Text me the address. I'll start with the neighbors. When the sun went down, I stood outside the motel, phone warm in my hand, listening to the hum of insects and the far-off whine of highway tires. The team was set. Dana with the law, Leo with the code, Angela with the streets. Each one a different kind of weapon. And me? I was the reason to use the night wind carried that dry desert smell, dust, sage, and inevitability. Somewhere out there, behind their new fences, the HOA was sipping wine and sleeping soundly, certain that the man they'd erased was gone for good. They'd find out soon enough. I wasn't erased. I was writing myself back in. 2 days later, Leo called just after sunrise. I'd barely finished my first cup of coffee when his name lit up my phone. Hope you're sitting down, he said, because this rabbit hole runs deep. That was Leo. No preamble, no decoration. He'd spent 48 hours sifting county filings, scraping the HOA site, and, as he liked to put it, visiting a few unlocked rooms. Your security system, the one you set to local only, he began. Someone reconfigured it 3 months after you left. Remote login. They wiped 6 months of footage and looped a fake offline screen. I stared at the motel wall, the paint yellowed by too many summers. Hacked. More like borrowed credentials, he said. But here's the part you'll like least. The deletion requests traced to an IP block registered to Stone Ridge Circle's admin office. Same range as their HOA portal. My pulse didn't spike. It settled, heavy, steady, and the authorization signature inside your camera log, Leo continued. It resolves to an account used by Delaney Sharp, the zoning supervisor, the man on leave. I let silence do its work. When you've worked long days in desert heat, you learn the difference between noise and information. This was the second kind. There's more, Leo said. Their billing platform cached a short internal memo. It's bare bones. Date stamp, a few lines. I'll send it once I clean the headers. Send everything, I said. Already in your inbox minus the memo, he replied. Give me an hour. By late morning, Dana was in the motel parking lot, sleeves rolled once, reading printouts across the hood of her car like a field officer scanning a map. Her eyes moved, cool and exact. OAP on the wipes, she said. Sharp on the authorization trail. That's not sloppy. That's orchestration. And intent, I added. Intent, she repeated as if setting a nail. We can move for a stronger freeze. Angela arrived by noon, dusty boots, hair tied back, a manila folder thick with photographs. Retired teacher, she said, tapping the folder. Drone hobbyist. Dates everything, geotags it. He's been flying over this valley for 2 years, calls it watching the land remember itself. We spread the photos on the motel bed, my place alone and sun-baked, trenches staked where desert crust used to be, bulldozers crawling like beetles, frames rising before any permit date on Sharp's approvals. Each image carried time like a watermark you couldn't wash off. Contractors? I asked. 2 crews, Angela said. Paid through a Nevada holding firm. That firm lists a strategic partner. The initials match Karen's. Also, Sharp's wife is cousin to one of the HOA board members. They call that a strong community. I call it a closed loop. Dana exhaled through her nose. Timeline, motive, method were past civil negligence. I nodded. Outside, a truck rolled past on the highway, its growl receding into the heat. Inside, the room felt colder. Leo texted mid-afternoon. Memo clean, sending via encrypted link. I opened my laptop. The PDF was small, the kind of thing you'd overlook if you didn't know where to stare. No letterhead, just a timestamp and 15 words. Karen wants the Martin parcel ready for full site integration by Q2. Board needs this done before he comes back. Assume he won't. That was all. 15 nails hammered into whatever patience I had left. I didn't move, didn't speak. The motel air conditioner rattled in the window, blowing lukewarm air. Outside, the desert was unusually quiet. No wind, no insects, just the sound a place makes when something has shifted. Anger changes with age. At 20, it's loud, a summer storm that throws chairs. At 40, it turns quiet, focused. It stops shouting and starts aiming. I printed the memo. The page slid out warm. I set a fingertip on the last line and read it once, then again, until the ink felt carved, not printed. Assume he won't. I laughed once, dry, without humor. If they believed distance could erase ownership, they'd mistaken silence for surrender. Dana read the memo and didn't smile. Intent in writing, she said. We fold this into the injunction and prepare the criminal referral. We don't swing wildly. We drive straight. Angela leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. That line isn't just arrogance, she said. It's a schedule. They planned around you not existing. Then we reschedule, I said. The rest of the day turned into logistics. Dana drafted the next filing. Leo mirrored everything off-site and started pulling certificate chains for the so-called notary. Angela went hunting for invoices and quiet mouths ready to talk once the wind changed. At dusk, I drove out to the ridge alone. The new fence caught the evening light, cedar gone orange, shadows falling long toward the canyon. My house sat where it always had, stubborn, square, a landmark to my own memory. Down the slope, the pastel houses pined like polished lies. Somewhere out of sight, a sprinkler hissed over decorative stone where soil used to breathe. I walked the fence line to the corner where my marker should have been. It had been replaced by a bright orange stake, parcel 14 billions. Mine was 14A, 1 letter. That's all it takes to make a lie look official. I crouched, brushed grit off the stamped numerals, and said it softly to the wood, to the dirt, to whoever keeps a record no paper can overwrite. This is still mine. Back at the motel, close to midnight, the neon from a vacancy sign flickered like a tired heartbeat. The email from Leo pinged again. Redundant copies. Chain of custody notes. A short line all archived, their portals sloppy. I'll have board chat logs by morning. I didn't answer. I sat with the memo under the lamp and let the quiet do its work. The anger didn't flare. It clarified. I thought of the months overseas, 12-hour days and 90-degree heat. The kind that strips excuses from a man and leaves him with whatever backbone he's got. That heat taught me something I had nearly forgotten. Survival isn't volume. It's endurance, preparation, and the will to outlast someone else's convenience. They had money. They had contacts. They had paperwork that wore a polite smile. I had the land. I had time. And now I had their words. By morning, Dana's draft was ready. Expanded injunction. Notice of intent for criminal referral. Exhibits labeled in a list that read like a confession written by a dozen hands. Forged affidavit with a dead man's signature. Digital notarization without a proper certificate chain. IP logs from a fiber line registered to the HOA. Camera deletions by Sharp. Drone images predating permits. The memo that assumed I was a ghost. We met in the parking lot again. Same sun, same heat, same 3 people who decided to believe me before the headlines did. Dana checked the filing packet one more time. Angela handed me a photo of the first foundation trench, a cut into the earth where no one had asked permission. Leo on speaker said 2 words I needed to hear. Chains clean. I slid the memo into a plastic sleeve and tucked it behind the deed in my folder. Proof of intent shouldn't travel loose. Next stop's the courthouse, Dana said. Not just yet, I answered. First stop's the fence. They didn't ask why. They knew. We drove out to get her. I stepped to the gate, read the sign they'd bolted there. Stone Ridge Circle Hoa. Private access. Members only. The metal was still warm from the sun. The bolts were new and bright, like they were proud to hold the lie in place. I pressed my palm flat to the sign and pictured it gone. Then I stepped back, breathed once, and felt the plan click into its tracks. Steady. Silent. Inevitable. They wanted this quiet. They were about to get the opposite. When you've worked long in hostile heat, you learn to make time your ally. You pace the day, ration the water, move when the sun gives you an edge. Paper wars are no different. You file when the clock hurts them most. You speak when silence has boxed them in. You let their words trap their feet. I tucked the memo back into the folder, the plastic sleeve whispering as it closed. The desert wind lifted just enough to move the mesquite. Somewhere over the ridge, a hawk turned a slow circle, carving its line in the air like it owned the map. I looked at those houses, their glass, their tile, their perfect lines, and felt nothing like hate. Hate is loud, wasteful. I felt something leaner. They had assumed I wouldn't come back. They would learn what assumption costs. Let's go, I said. We left the fence behind us and drove toward the courthouse, sun bright in the windshield, the day already shaping to the work ahead. The engine's hum sounded like resolve. It wasn't vengeance. It was arithmetic. You forge one signature, falsify one permit, erase one man, and sooner or later, the sum comes due. The mediation room smelled like stale coffee and new carpet, a neutral space chosen exactly because it gave nothing away. The law office in Sedona had one long conference table, chairs that made polite squeaks when you shifted, and a wall of frosted glass that let light in but kept the world out. Cameras were allowed, but the mediato are warned about decorum and civility. This is about resolution, she said, smiling like a person who had never had to worry about whether a signature was real. When I walked in, Karen was already there, perfect suit, hair in place, posture like a queen who expected to be bowed to. Her attorney sat to her left, a man with a practiced smile and a tie that matched his shoes. Greg, the dentist, someone I'd later learned liked to talk on the radio, sat stiffly behind them, pretending to read a newsletter. Dana sat across from me with a tablet open and a pen ready. Leo had wired audio equipment into his coat and sat toward the corner with an expression that said he would rather be anywhere but here, but that he wouldn't miss this for anything. Angela hovered near the doorway, her presence a quiet warning to anyone thinking of making a move after hours. The mediator said the usual niceties. Let's try to be reasonable. Let's find common ground. They all nodded. In my head, I'd already mapped the whole room into pieces. Karen's confidence, her lawyer's posture, Greg's impatience. Everything a person shows is as useful as what they hide. I chose to play tired. That's the advantage of being older. You know how to wear exhaustion without showing weakness. I leaned back, let my shoulders drop, and spoke in a steady, low voice. Look, I said, I don't want trouble. I want my home. Short sentence, plain. It sounded small in that room of suits, but it landed. Karen smiled that same thin smile. We believe the property to be unused, she said. The board followed county procedure. We acted in good faith. Dana's finger tapped the tablet, slow and deliberate. Good faith requires truth, she replied. There are documents that suggest otherwise. Karen's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. He was waiting for me to overplay my hand, for me to get loud and undignified. They were. Used to people shouting when cornered. It made for pleasing television. I let them think I might be that kind of man. So, I said softly, leaning forward as if the conversation had become personal. About these documents. Who handled your filings? Who notarized the affidavit? Karen answered easily, the kind of answer practiced against skepticism. We used a contracted notary service and a development consultant, all within the county's guidance. Standard procedure. Her choice of words mattered. Contracted notary service. The phrase slipped out like an apology, casual and unguarded. Leo's gloved fingers found a recorder under the table, already recording. Dana's eyes met mine for half a heartbeat, and then returned to Karen with the steady calm of a professional about to take a deposition. "You said contracted," Dana said, quiet but sharp. "Do you have the original physical notarizations, the certificates? Because on the county deposition, the notary, Leonard Pierce, is listed as having retired in 2018. He told us he never notarized anything for your group." Karen's smile faltered, just a flicker. She fanned a laminated packet and opened a page as if proof were there and could be waved like a wand. "Our service handles everything. It's standard." "Standard? How?" I pressed. My voice was flat, but the question had teeth. "Is standard a county-registered notary with a current commission, or is standard a person you pay to sign documents and move things through the system?" Her attorney leaned in, attempting to cut the room off. "Mr. Martin, is he your notary?" Dana asked, not looking at the lawyer. She looked at Karen, and the room felt colder. Karen's jaw tightened. She chose her words slow, like someone deciding whether to burn a bridge. "We used a contracted notary. They handled the digital filings." Digital filings. A phrase meant to speed things up, to sound modern and efficient. But in that word was the thin seam where forgery hides. "You're aware that digital filings carry metadata, timestamps, origin IPs, certificate chains?" Leo asked from his corner. He was speaking to the room now, not quietly. "We've traced the origin of the file uploads. They come from an IP range associated with Stone Ridge Circle's office. And the digital certificate used to sign that affidavit does not chain to the certificate of Mr. Pierce. It chains to a shell account." A ripple went through their group. A gasp, soft. "You're accusing us of fraud," Karen snapped. But her voice had the brittle edge of someone frantically checking a story that might be true. "I'm stating facts," Dana said. "We have the documents and the logs. We have drone footage of construction before the permit. We have the memo that says, 'Assume he won't come back.' We're asking for transparency or we will take this to court." The mediator raised a hand. "Please, let's avoid threats." She looked at me like she wanted this to be a small neighborhood spat, not a criminal matter. But the room had already changed. The air had been shifted by a single admission, contracted notary, and a recording, starting at the rhythm of how people confess when they think the room will protect them. Karen scribbled something on her clipboard, her fingers a little unsteady. By the time the session broke for a 10-minute recess, I had what I needed. Karen had said enough to establish a pattern. Her lawyer looked defeated, in a way lawyers rarely look when they think they've won. Leo had the IP ranges captured. The mediator had been forced to note objections on the record, and Dana had quietly recorded the session. We walked into the hallway as if nothing had happened. Angela winked at me and said, "They're rattled." I felt a cold satisfaction. Not joy. Satisfaction is a quieter thin. Back in the car, I let the engine hum and the air conditioning cool my face. The desert light was hard, but inside me a plan was taking shape, precise and clean. They wanted a conversation. I'd given them one. They'd given me answers when they thought civility would keep them safe. For the first time since I'd found that fence, the sense that the tide could be turned moved from possibility to plan. They'd made a mistake, one I intended to exploit, with the patience and discipline the heat had taught me. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old paper, the sort of smell that makes people speak in measured tones. The hearing room filled quick. Reporters, neighbors, 2 camera crews that had somehow found their way in, and a scattering of faces in the gallery who'd shown up out of curiosity or kinship or both. I felt my boots on the courtroom floor. Solid, familiar. The room had a rhythm. You learn to listen to it. The hush before someone speaks, the rustle of papers, the way a judge's gavel punctuates truth. Judge Evelyn Harper took the bench at 9 sharp. Stern, composed, the kind of person who had seen more than she let on. She looked at the lawyers and then at me, a small nod like an invitation to proceed. Dana stood, calm as a river. She laid our case out the way a good builder lays foundation, methodically, in layers. She started with the obvious and worked inward. "Your Honor," she said, "we will show by a preponderance of the evidence that the acts alleged were not isolated errors, but a sustained conspiracy to appropriate private property through document fraud, tampering of digital evidence, and collusion with county employees." She called the clerk from the county records office first. He testified to what he'd seen when Mr. Martin requested records. 2 files, 1 genuine, 1 provisional. He confirmed the digital timestamps and that the scanned affidavit bore a signature purporting to be Mr. Martin's. Next came Angela. She walked to the stand like someone who had spent a career staring down criminals and wasn't much impressed by theatrics. She described the drone photos she'd recovered from a hobbyist. Foundation trenches and bulldozers active months before any permit had been stamped. She explained how contractors had testified under interview that the site work began well before permit notices were posted. Names, places, dates. Her voice was plain, her facts were solid. Then Leo. The room murmured when Dana introduced him as a cybersecurity consultant. He spoke slowly, avoiding jargon, because he knew this room had people for whom IP meant nothing and people for whom it meant everything. He explained in simple terms, the security system on my property had been accessed remotely. The system logs showed deletions and loops. The deletion requests traced back to IP addresses assigned to the Stone Ridge Circle Administrative Office. He handed the court a printout of logs and a map showing the routes. The judge scanned it, then looked up. "You traced the metadata?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Leo replied. "And if I may add, the timestamps on the digital notarizations do not chain to the notary listed. They chain to a certificate that resolves to an account registered through a shell company." A soft gasp fluttered through the gallery. Karen's lawyer rose to object. Foundation, hearsay. But Dana was ready. She had anticipated every objection and had the foundation in her pocket. She called witnesses in sequence: the retired notary who testified he had never notarized for Stone Ridge, the county employee who verified Delaney Sharp's sudden leave, the contractor who quietly admitted he'd been paid through a Nevada-based holding firm when Karen's counsel tried to paint the development as a benevolent company. Immunity necessity. Dana dismantled that narrative piece by piece. "Your Honor," Dana said, voice even, "they will tell you they acted in good faith. But intent matters. When construction begins before permits, when cameras are scrubbed, when the board's own logs contain a memo explicitly instructing, assume he won't come back, that is no accident. That is intent. That is conspiracy." Karen sat beside her counsel, jaw tight. She put on a mask of composure, but the edges were fraying. Her attorney cross-examined, tried to poke holes, to suggest misunderstandings, to imply clerical errors. He asked leading questions about timelines. He described emergency housing needs and community benefit. It sounded hollow. At one point, he leaned toward Karen and whispered something. She nodded, then turned her face toward the judge as if to demonstrate contrition. It made for a decent picture, the kind of theater some people mistake for truth. Dana's cross-examination was surgical. She produced the memo Leo had found, put it on the stand, and asked simply, "Who wrote that?" Karen's lawyer objected. Irrelevant. Cumulative. But Dana already had the court's patience on her side. She spoke slowly, deliberately, letting the words land between the courtroom walls. "We have a document dated months prior to permit applications that states in plain language an instruction to prepare Mr. Martin's parcel for integration because we assume he won't come back. That sentence proves not confusion or negligence, but plan and motive. We request, Your Honor, that the court not only consider civil remedies but forward these findings to the district attorney for criminal investigation. We request criminal referral." The room inhaled like one organism. Karen's face lost color. Her attorney's mouth tightened into a line. The judge's pen hovered over her notes. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the audio equipment Leo had set up, every word being captured clean. Judge Harper looked directly at Dana, then at me in the gallery. "Miss Pritchard," she said, her voice measured. "A criminal referral is a serious request. It requires clear and convincing evidence before this court, and a formal submission to the district attorney's office. Are you prepared to certify that the evidence you've presented meets that threshold?" Dana didn't flinch. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe the evidence establishes probable cause for the crimes of forgery, perjury, tampering with public records, and conspiracy. We will provide the court with a full exhibit list and certified copies." "You've provided exhibits," the judge said. "I will review them." There was a pause, thin and electric. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. A neighbor in the gallery crossed himself. Karen's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. The judge tapped her pen and then decided to take control of the tempo. This court will not be used as a stage for public spectacle, she said. We will proceed with decorum. However, and here she looked at Karen with the coolness of someone who had seen many manipulations, these allegations, if supported, are grave. I will review the submitted exhibits in detail. I will allow a narrow additional set of depositions to secure chain of custody and to confirm the authenticity of the digital traces. Dana nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. The mediator's chair in the back of my mind had been a controlled warm-up. This was not warm-up anymore. This was the arena. We'd made them sweat, and now the judge had put the ball in motion. As the morning session adjourned for a short recess, the courtroom buzzed. Cameras swiveled to capture Karen's face. Reporters scribbled. In the hallway, neighbors asked questions into recorders. Some thanked me with small, awkward hand shakes. I felt none of the performance. I felt only a cool, steady resolve. We had asked for criminal referral in open court. Whether the DA would pick it up, that was a separate fight. But the judge had not dismissed the request. She had not waved it away. She had ordered further depositions and a careful review. That was all we needed for now. Outside, the sun was high and blunt, throwing hard-edged shadows. I stood at the courthouse steps and lit a cigarette I'd promised myself I'd quit years ago. It tasted of nicotine and the kind of relief that comes when a plan is working. Dana stood beside me, folding her notes, expression unreadable but confident. We pushed the line, she said. They folded on stage. Now we let the law do the work. I watched Karen leave the courtroom, escorted by her attorney, shoulders squared but eyes not meeting mine. The look she gave me was not one of defiance now, so much as calculation, someone tallying losses and looking for a way to trade. Inside my pocket, my phone buzzed. Leo's message, hold tight. I've archived everything. I'm moving copies off-site. I pocketed the phone. The fight was no longer personal in the way it had been the day I found that fence. It was public. It was procedural. It was loud in all the places the HOA had tried to make quiet. And for the first time since I'd touched down in Phoenix, there was a feeling I'd missed. The sound of momentum starting to turn in my favor. 2 weeks later, the courthouse was packed again. Word had spread, neighbors, reporters, even a few law students who wanted to see what happens when a small-town hoe bites off more than it can chew. The hallway smelled like coffee and nerves. Everyone spoke in low voices, as if the outcome was already heavy in the air. I took my usual seat beside Dana. Leo sat 2 rows back, laptop open, headphones around his neck. Angela stood near the door, arms crossed, scanning the crowd like she was back on patrol. Across the aisle, Karen Holdridge sat perfectly still, dressed in navy, posture flawless. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was the one presiding. Her lawyer flipped through papers with nervous energy. He knew what was coming. She just didn't believe it. Judge Harper entered right on time, gavel echoing once. This hearing concerns the disposition of property claims and any referral arising from prior testimony, she said. The court has reviewed the submitted exhibits, digital evidence, and witness depositions. Her tone was flat, almost kind. That was worse. It meant the decision was already written. Dana stood. Your Honor, before ruling, we'd like to submit one supplemental exhibit, verbatim transcript from the recorded mediation session where Ms. Holdridge acknowledged use of a contracted notary service in connection with digital filings. Karen's attorney jumped up. Objection. That session was meant to be confidential. Overruled, Judge Harper said. The confidentiality clause does not extend to statements made in furtherance of fraud. That line hit like a gunshot. Dana slid the printed transcript to the clerk. The judge read it silently, lips moving once over the words. Her expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The hum of air conditioning seemed louder. The pen tapping in the back row stopped. Finally, Judge Harper set the papers down. Miss Holdridge, she said, voice even. You've argued that your actions were the result of administrative error and community initiative. The evidence shows otherwise. Karen's face stiffened. The corner of her mouth twitched. The court finds, the judge continued, clear and convincing evidence of intentional misrepresentation, document forgery, tampering with public records, and abusive zoning procedure by the Stone Ridge Circle Homeowners Association acting under your direction. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of someone exhaling. Effective immediately, Judge Harper said, this court restores full title and property rights to Mr. Riley Martin. The structures built on his parcel are deemed unauthorized and shall be vacated within 15 calendar days. The HOA is further ordered to compensate Mr. Martin for damages and misuse of utilities. In addition, this court will forward all exhibits and testimony to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation into the conduct of Miss Holdridge and all complicit parties." Dana closed her binder softly. Leo looked up from his screen and nodded once. I just sat there, staring at the wood grain of the table, breathing in the quiet after the storm. Then the double doors at the back opened. 2 sheriff's deputies walked in, uniforms crisp, boots polished, faces unreadable. One stopped beside Karen's table. "Miss Holdridge," he said, "you're under arrest for suspected fraud, perjury, tampering with public records, and conspiracy to defraud the state. Please stand and place your hands behind your back." For the first time she looked human, eyes wide, mouth opening slightly as if to protest, but no sound came out. Her attorney whispered something frantic. She didn't move. The deputy repeated himself, tone firmer this time. Karen stood slowly, every inch of it reluctant. They cuffed her in front of everyone. The click of the metal was louder than it should have been, echoed against the walls, sharp and final. Greg, the dentist, sitting 2 rows behind her, put a "Ha! ND" over his face. Someone in the gallery gasped. The judge didn't look up. As the deputies turned her toward the door, she glanced at me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even hate. It was disbelief, the look of someone who had built their world on lies and finally saw it collapsing. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. She walked out, flanked by law and silence. The courtroom door shut with a heavy thud that felt like punctuation. After that, everything sounded distant. Papers rustling, people murmuring, footsteps leaving. Dana gathered the files and turned to me. "That's that," she said softly. "Not yet," I replied, "but close." Outside, the sun hit like a forge. The courthouse steps shimmered in the heat. Reporters swarmed, microphones waving, questions flying. "How does it feel to win? What will you do next? Do you plan to rebuild?" I said the only thing worth saying: "I'm going home." That evening I drove out to the ridge alone. The fence was still there, but it didn't look menacing anymore, just wood and wire, something that could be taken down. My house stood waiting. Same porch, same wind through the canyon, same stubborn silence. But the 2 new houses sat there too, beautiful in their wrongness. And I thought about what to do with them. Demolishing them would have been satisfying, but short. Keeping them meant something different. It meant turning their arrogance into my reward. So I kept them, renovated one, rented the other, called it the house that Hoa built. Bookings filled fast. People wanted to stay where justice had a postal code. 2 months later, I watched the sun set from my porch again. The land was quiet. No lawyers, no fences, no trespassers. Just me and the hum of cicadas and the slow exhale of a place finally breathing right. Sometimes people drive up just to see it. They ask, "Is it true? Did they really build on your land?" I tell them, "Yes." And now the HOA pays me rent. They always laugh, but I don't. Not really. Because the truth isn't funny. It's heavier than that. It's the sound of a gavel echoing through a room full of lies. It's the click of a handcuff closing on someone who thought she'd never hear it. And it's the silence after, when justice finally, quietly comes home. The world moves fast after a verdict. Papers file themselves, reporters find new stories. People shake your hand, call you inspiring, and move on to dinner plans. But the land doesn't move fast. It takes its time remembering who it belongs to. Karen Holdridge's name was on every local headline for a week. HOA president arrested for land fraud. Judge refers case for criminal prosecution. The words looked good in print, but I didn't feel any triumph when I read them, just quiet confirmation that the system, slow, rusty, reluctant, had still managed to work. The district attorney filed charges within 10 days: forgery, perjury, conspiracy, and fraud. Her co-conspirators, Sharp, from zoning, Greg the dentist, and 2 board members, were all listed in the indictment. The HOA froze its accounts, and within a month the organization itself voted to dissolve. The same people who once told me I wasn't part of the community now stood in line to sign dissolution papers. Funny how fast principles fade when the lawyers start billing by the hour. I didn't attend the sentencing. Didn't need to. The law would finish what it started. Karen's kingdom had already fallen. The rest was paperwork. I spent those weeks cleaning the property, tearing down the HOA signs, restoring my fences. The workers I hired were local, good people who remembered my grandfather's name, who still called me Mr. Martin out of habit. Together we pulled out the stakes, repainted the markers, reconnected the old well line. Each nail I drove into that wood felt Lee. kapunkt.